Hi, I'm Marcus Coward, and this is Wake Up New Bedford. I'm here with Kat Knutsen, and we talked about a lot in part one. And she runs several social media pages, but represents the Siren, and that helps promote and helps encourage artists to increase what they're doing as far as for their artistry and to better promote them into the public eye and to help with their networking as well. She does a lot. And so if you didn't get that from part one, then you're gonna learn a little bit more about this in part two. And so one burning question I wanted to ask you that we didn't have time for in part one was, and you kind of touched on this in that you said that you've created some small systems already, but how big is the team? Or is it really just you behind the Siren?
Well, it depends on how you identify it. So the team to me is people who are making events happen. They are part of this team collectively. Formally, it's just me.
Okay.
But I look at entities and individuals that create events or opportunities that are related to the visual art or music side. So I keep it focused in that, but then that is open to how the visual art or the music activity in the area highlights subjects that are much more broader that affect the community. Okay, and do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Like when you say affect the community more broadly, then what exactly do you mean by that? So there's, if you look at on the Instagram page, there's a few posts from the last week that kind of go in different directions. Okay. One of them was highlighting the Gallery X exhibit that's out right now, the social justice exhibit, that's very focused on the fact that there are dynamics happening on the larger scope in the country, fascist type dynamics, and the exhibit's trying to create a sense of safe space, community gathering, community engagement, to highlight the fact that we still have the freedom to be able to speak against what we don't believe in. That's very specific. There's another post that was highlighting AHA's promotion, AHA Night's promotion of the fact that the New Bedford Film Festival is getting ready to highlight the winners of this last season's submissions, which is very different. It's a little bit more formal, and it's highlighting the fact that the New Bedford Film Festival is a really strong, fairly new entity in the area that's creating a channel of opportunity for video producers, independent indie video producers, to highlight, what it is that they're creating their work around, which is slightly different. Then there was a couple of posts that just used like the Siren logo, and they put the videos put like a ton of flyers for events that are going on, not just in New Bedford, but maybe in the Providence area, other parts of Rhode Island, events going on down in some of the North Carolina, Virginia area because of some of the connections I have down there. And so every time I make contact with an entity that is community engaging, creative engaging, visual art or music based, I look into what they're trying to do, and then I try to further highlight their efforts, and then try to sew all of these individual posts or individual highlights to something that's more broadly connected, which is a creative action, creative engagement, creative activity, creative pulse, creative response, whether the response is more professionally focused on production and development, or if it's something that's like saying whistleblower type action, like, hey, there's some dynamics happening, we need to bring some attention to this, or if it's somebody who just really enjoys a particular type of creative hobby and they're very community engaging with that. Like they might set up independent events with restaurants or other types of venues to have a creative activity available to the customers that go there. So it's more for that more consumer direction. It goes in all these different ways, but it tries to stay focused on visual art and music, because it's very easy to go and branch in these other directions. For sure. So the control variables are visual art, music, performance. Smart. Yeah. Because otherwise it would. And you're already getting slightly broad, but trying to stay within that realm. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I do want to talk about your music, but even before then, you mentioned that you have students. Yeah. Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about your teaching right now? So I'm getting ready to hit my 10-year mark teaching. Where do you teach? I teach at Bristol Community College. Okay, great. And I've been teaching foundations there for, again, almost 10 years. And I teach between structure drawing, figure drawing, 2D design, digital photography, electronic imaging, which is kind of like, it's not animation, but it's video art in a way. I've taught the art careers class. I have an MFA in painting, and I'm excited to teach a painting class there at some point, but it's a different dynamic. But
you haven't taught painting
not
yet?
Not through the school. I
Wow,
teach I teach through my studio independently, but at the school it's mostly foundation drawing, figure drawing, 2D design maybe.
Sure.
But over the last few years, it's been mostly focused on either figure drawing and structure drawing and electronic imaging. And I really like teaching the electronic imaging class. I feel like it's a proper design, expressive class that caters to the way that people receive content these days, social media platforms.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so electronic imaging is like a class. I teach it in a way where students learn how to write a story that's going to take place over the next like 30 seconds, and then they design storyboard for that, character design, environment art design, Foley sound design, ambient sound design, and then they put it together in a small production. And then based on the level of the class collectively, I'll then invite people like New Bedford Film Festival, Ethan Daguire, to come look at the work. I'll invite friends who have worked with other parties like Disney to come look at the work to kind of show the students that, hey, if you enjoy this and you want to develop these skills and create a strong caliber of like portfolio, and there's ways to get connected to other entities that are looking for the fact that you're already creating a little bit of a machine within yourself. So it's like foundation exposure, habit, like review, like how are you spending your time, what are your habits, looking at goal setting, like a big project that you take on over the whole semester is broken down into small miniature goals. And so it's exposing students to that process of like, if they have an idea, they could bring it to life, but it's going to take a lot of these steps. So there's a lot of like psychological like growth that happens because we all get stuck in different parts of those processes, or we get stuck in the weeds, like overdeveloping something, or we kind of like neglect something. And so we kind of, I like teaching that class because it shows them all of that process.
And I'm really impressed by that, because that's something that not enough educators, but artists and creatives focus on. Like, they can get so caught up on being creative and feeding their passion, but they're not looking at the how-to in order to actually bring that to life.
Yes, yep.
And it seems like that's a huge focus for you and your students. And it really thought through, honestly. Yes,
so it's based on when I was a student, what I wish they would have told me.
Yes, that's what it sounds like.
That's where it all comes from. And what I'm seeing in front of me, what I get exposed to all the time, and I'm like, how could I bring this awareness to the classroom through that creative channel? And so it's still foundations and formal training, but it's through the eyes of, well, what are you going to do with this? And if you enjoy this, like, you could wield it in a really cool way, you know?
And what's the name of the class?
That's electronic imaging.
Electronic imaging.
Yes.
And so you didn't learn that at school. Did you learn that just through working, or for this class in particular you kind of taught yourself?
I taught myself. So I got to give a shout out. There was a professor I did have at UMass, and he gave one of the best nuggets of advice. His name was Kurt Wisniewski. I think he was a printmaking professor. I remember I had a meeting with him. This was when I was a grad student, and he said, if you ever get the chance to teach, just say yes, and then learn the skill to a professional degree.
Wow.
And I was like, okay.
No pressure. Right.
Well, he was right. He was right, because right after I graduated, the following semester I was offered a drawing class, so I didn't have to go through the interview process. They came to me. I was offered the drawing class and also offered the chance to teach the computer graphics class. I was working with the InDesign program when the Siren first started, and it was a print publication. And I was learning about how much it cost to print, and what does it mean to start a nonprofit, and distribution. I was going like the old school way. But in doing that, I was offered the computer graphics class because I was doing the thing at a professional level. I didn't go to school for layout design, graphic design, journal. That's not what I studied. I studied painting. And so when he said that, and I was offered the chance to teach the computer graphics class, I was like, yes. Electronic imaging was the same. And so electronic imaging, I grew up with Fantasia, I grew up with Bugs Bunny, I grew up watching film. I was always really sensitive to how the film score affected the visual, and I was always obsessed with, well, how did they make this sense of like playful reality cartoons come to life? So character arc, action, storyboarding, character design, animation, keyframes. Then there's the world of Photoshop or Krita, where you're learning how to use these really cool interfaces to design these layers, whether it's for environment art or character design. There's motion design software like After Effects and Premiere. There's so much out there. So it's like, again, I think going back to the fact that I grew up with parents that were more systems-based and computer-based, that kind of kicked in a little bit.
Sure.
So when I learned these programs, I was like, oh, this is a system, this is a system, this is a system. Let's like braid these systems together, but add that creative twist to it, and then it turns into these miniature production type classes.
And so I'm glad you brought up scores for movies, because I love that aspect of cinema too.
Yes.
You know, how music can affect how the movie comes out and how it makes the viewer feel.
Yes.
So talk to me about your influence in music and when you got started with that.
John Williams, James Horner, Helen Jane Long, love those. Love them so much. They have a sense of like, they elevate a scene emotively beyond what's in front. And I can't remember which one did the Indiana Jones theme song, but I remember when I was a kid, and I think there was like an Olympics going on of some sort. Indiana Jones theme song was used as like a Pepsi commercial or something.
Really? Okay.
And I remember the theme song stuck with me. Dun, 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 dun. So we had this little piano at home that my parents had, and I was like, I want to learn how to play that one song because I just can't get it out of my head.
Yeah.
So when you were asking in the earlier interview, what did I start first, music or visual art? And I was like, it depends how you look at it, because I think music got the first initial like creative exploration, because I remember hearing that and then wanting to learn how to play it. And so I started just tinkering around with piano like at that younger age. I didn't ever like formally study it because I wasn't like studious enough to like practice, but I was curious enough to just kind of tinker around, but I didn't really take it on. But
was that pre-high school?
That was like elementary school.
Sure. Wow.
Yeah, that was like
that's like a core memory kind of thing.
Yes, it's a core memory type situation. And so that I've always been like in awe of what music does.
Yes.
Like this moment right now, if you put ambient music that has whatever flavor, it's going to make this interview come across like, you know, some interviews that have that like low bass, like dun dun dun, like, and it makes the interview have a little bit more of an adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
Versus if you have those videos that have that more flowery music, it just creates a different psyche.
Yeah, more chill.
And so I've always been in awe of how music does that. And the score musicians or the music score writers just, I think that's magic in what they do.
Absolutely.
And then on the animation side, Fantasia, which blends the two together, you take music and then you add visual storytelling, drawing, color, animation, shape, then you just create this whole world. And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. How did they do that? I wanted to do that. And then I remember growing up, my mother's family from Mexico. So my mother's family's got Mexico and Spain. Father's family's Alaska and Mayflower, basically.
Okay.
So my mother's family, I remember this really popular painting that hung over my grandmother's, the door to my grandmother's bathroom. It's a popular painting of an angel looking over children that are crossing a bridge, and the angel's got like a star over it. So I remember looking at that painting and thinking, that's not a picture, but it feels real. What is that? So it's like another one of those core memories where I was like, what is it with people making images that feel like a real moment, but I can tell it's not a picture. What is that?
Yeah.
And that I think was influential when I went in the more painterly direction and went into figurative art.
Sure.
But going back to the electronic imaging thing, it blends it all together. It's a perfect omelet.
Yeah.
And so it demands a little bit of knowing how to manage files, different file types, JPEGs, PNGs, PNG sequences, Photoshop files, Illustrator files maybe, organization files on like the cloud or on different hard drives. It demands like a little bit of that organization with storytelling, like what's the story about, how are you going to pace it out, and then you kind of dig into that story, find visual symbols. Visual symbols are so powerful. We're in a world where we need a new set of symbols because people are so sensitive to symbols that are delivered to them. It would be really cool to have like a whole creative front that reorganizes creative symbols that remind us what we're capable of, and then to take action based on what we're good at. Like symbols are so huge. Anyway, so they write the story, they look at the symbols that go into that story, and they create the content, whether it's the character and the environment art, and then they create the assets to help make motion, bring motion to those assets. And then once motion's added to those assets, then you look at the Foley sound. Like if I'm walking, like there's the sound of walking, but it doesn't have to be the obvious sound of walking. You can put anything you want.
Yeah.
Like you can, I don't know if you've ever seen the YouTube video of Disney artist Foley sound people. They have all these like like weird tools that they use to create these Foley
I've seen
sounds
some
for
clips of what you're
characters.
talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
So you could substitute anything you want
Yeah.
into Foley sound, and that's like a painterly practice in itself.
Yes,
Like if I'm
yeah.
tapping my foot, but then I put something like a squeak underneath it, like
Yeah.
then it adds a whole other like psychological
really
element to it.
interesting. Yeah.
So we talk about that with Foley sound, and the ambient sound, of course, is the emotive essence of the design that you're trying to deliver within the concept. So they get to like put all these things together like a stew, and they create their own production from it. And I think it's a really cool project to take on, because when we're scrolling and looking at all this content, we're basically looking at examples of that type of content. There's all these programs that create default design, simple decisions like how long is a video? Is there sound going to be added to it? Are you going to add text over it? Is there going to be, and then there's these programs and these apps that were being sold, and there's AI getting involved where you can like make all these different amalgamations, but in the end we're like these creative reflections of whatever we want to see more of in the world. And so the electronic imaging class is a really cool class that offers students the chance to kind of express their ideas in that format.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to ask my next question, but what I want to ask now is, you brought up creating a new set of symbols for people to understand.
Yeah.
And because we're in our third part of this interview. We have around like 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So I want to leave enough time for the second question
Okay.
to really wrap up the interview. But when you bring up new symbols, what comes to mind? What do you mean by new symbols?
If you were to walk down the street and see a person, do you immediately think of them as friend or foe? Why do you think that? How do you engage with them because of that?
Sure.
What have you been ingesting that makes you think that? That's, I think, a pretty quick answer.
Sure.
Yeah, that's just an example. So whatever's going on in your community or in your family, it affects not just you. It affects the one that you just saw in the bread aisle
Totally.
at the grocery store. And so just a basic like symbol system that shows that one, we're all affected by the same things. We need water, oxygen, accessibility to basic living resources, the chance to have our own personal space to process the life experiences that we're having. Like everyone needs to have access to that.
Yes.
Symbols around that. And then also symbols that highlight where resources currently are or how systems are currently designed. Symbols that highlight, things don't always have to be this way. Symbols that highlight the fact that things aren't permanent. It's like, this is how it is now.
I'm just thinking, like, that was me thinking that you would be someone, I would love for you to redesign the city's website.
The city's website has a lot of information on it. I've looked at it. You're going to pay taxes. You're going to pay a water bill. It's like, or if that would be a really cool project. So we would need to create a budget for the web designer and the user experience designer and person with all the right information of what like the most common type of information people are seeking, as well as the information the city is trying to get out. That's a whole system design. That's not just a web design.
And no one's thinking about that. They're just slapping stuff there and like, it's probably fine. I think you would attack that problem like how you just broke it down so systematically and be able to make that more successful. And so you have so much knowledge that is really impressive.
I appreciate that.
Actually.
I appreciate that.
And so
thank you.
I guess my last question that I'm really excited for, because you're really excited about the electronic imaging class, and that just made me think about AI and how AI can be a really interesting tool for creatives.
It's great.
But then it can also be something really
dangerous.
Oh
yeah. The
and
deep fake stuff.
Talk about it. How do you, talking about symbols, okay, when I bring up AI, how does that make you feel?
Neutral. Neutral. Okay. On the positive side, if I'm trying to get a myriad of tasks done and I take the brain power to think about each one of those tasks, inefficient.
Sure.
If I use AI to help me figure out what's the best approach to do this, very efficient.
Okay.
The deepfake stuff, concerning.
Very,
very concerning.
Very.
And the way that algorithms are manipulated, the way that platforms have basically been, like, they're no longer free expressive platforms, they're basically propaganda juice platforms. It's like, very concerning. So it's there. What are you going to do with it? What are we going to do with it? The fact that we have the option to do something with it, is that being discussed? Or is it like, oh, it's just here, just deal with it, consume it? Like that goes back to like the symbols we need to remind people that we're capable and it's in our hands, and what we do now makes tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're so consumer oriented that tomorrow's like what was delivered, or what content came across like my feed of some sort, and that's what the status is of things. We're not as proactive.
Yes.
So AI could be used in a way to be more proactive against that passivity that's being heavily encouraged.
Would you, so I was going to ask, would you teach a class in AI, but so you've already talked a little bit about how you would use it. Do you use it on a regular basis?
I do.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
I do. Yeah, I use it for helping me organize stuff all the time. Like, let's say if I have, let's see. So I found this, okay, this is like, you have to do self-love, to kind of maintain yourself.
Absolutely.
So recently I've been fascinated by paper mache mask making, because I think masks are really fascinating symbols. And I think masks are really fun for video production potential. And so it's like, okay, let's, like, if you're gonna do a thing, make it be worth the thing you're doing. Like, how could you apply it later? So that my self-love is learn a new thing and then have fun working or doing whatever later on. So it's mask making. I looked at a ton of like video content, but then I asked a lot of AI questions, like what would be the best material approach for this? What would be the best material approach for this? And the information I got there was so much more consolidated and quicker. But then I got a chance to look at all these cool different artists on the other platforms, mostly YouTube, on how they're using these different materials and these different aesthetics and whatnot. And there's all these rabbit holes to go down with that. But AI takes that information and consolidates it really quickly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, and so do you see yourself in, the near future at some point teaching a class to creatives for teaching them a way to use it constructively?
From a business point of view, if that presented itself, or if I put together a class and enough people signed up for it and were interested in it, absolutely.
Sure.
I'm going to say that. And I say that in a self-love way, because in a previous way, it would be like, yes, I would love to, but then there's no structure.
Yes.
And so self-love means structure. So yes, I would love to teach that if there's some sort of structure that is set up, or if I find that there's a demand and I set up a structure for that and people say, yes, I want to learn more about this. So if there was a demand, yes, I'd be willing to help with that. I'd love to help with that, because I'd love to see what people would do with it.
Yeah. Because it's a revolutionary tool that can really level up people's, not just imagination, but their ability in order to express what they're thinking and what they picture.
Yes. One of the things I love about AI is it's, think about it as it's obviously, it's not your best friend, obviously, because they go with you way back, but like, let's say you want to have a question and you want no bias whatsoever. You just have a question you want to ask. It's very great at giving a very logical approach. No emotive influence of any kind. It's like, here's the things. I think that's one of the my favorite things about AI.
That's interesting.
And so, yeah.
Because I haven't really used it. Like I saw my girlfriend yesterday type into ChatGPT. She was writing this email and she wanted like the most professional way in order to say something. I'm like, that's such a apparently she uses it like quite often to just do small tasks like that, to just ask them objective question. And that they can be really useful for that. Well,
your own experience as a person, like you have things on your mind, you have different variables, and you have the field of information that you're coming at it with. It's great if you had 2 or 3 other people to share their insight on something before you relay a message. So AI is kind of like having access to those 2 or 3 other minds and giving, but you have to ask what you want. Like, you can't just say do a thing. You have to be mindful. You're a curator, basically. You have to be mindful of what you're inquiring about. And if you're wanting to come from different perspectives or different directions, then you have to be specific and adding qualifier words within those questions that you're asking of it. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. No, you can't just, it's not a all-knowing machine.
It's not the button. It's not the fix-it button. Fix the life.
It's a tool that we can use.
Yes.
And so we're wrapping up. We have a few minutes left. Okay. And so the last question I want to ask is, how do you stay hopeful for the future?
I try to look at myself and ask, like, what can I do better? Like, one of the things I'm trying to improve on is communication. When I get excited about something, I'll take off at warp speed. And I'll try to find collaborators. And I made the mistake in the past of working with potential. and enthusiasm is potential. And so I would assume enthusiasm meant we're going. That's not the case.
Yes.
So you have to have systems in check. And when I was talking about earlier of the siren growing in these different layers,
Yes.
now when I look at potential collaborators, I'm like, do they already have something going? And is it going in a similar enough direction that this could actually turn into something? Or are you going to be the one doing most of the work?
Yes.
That stemmed from initial enthusiasm. So hope starts with trying to work on myself first and trying to look at areas where like weakest link are. And for me, I think it's communication and no longer working from a state of seeing potential and seeing like I think things could be. There's all these things that could be, but there's proof of effort, proof of concept, and people acting on things that they really care about. And you can look for those fruits that they produce first.
You have to be realistic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think, moving forward, work on yourself and then look at, from a very didactic point of view, like which I love again about AI, it's so didactic, it's so formal. It's like, what do you want to improve? How could you improve on that, work on that? And then you'll start to see differently. You'll see the world differently. Like in all of this exchange that happened, we picked up on different cues from each other based on where our minds are.
Yeah.
And so when you have a mind that's like more elevated to the state that you want it to be, you see different bits of information and different things catch your attention.
Totally.
And so,
And so, you are a really positive person.
I try to be. I try to be.
And so, do you find that you're in the minority, or have you surrounded yourself around a lot of people where you aren't in the area of art, especially when you try and promote political art?
The political art is new for me, as far as really looking at it. In a nutshell, focusing on that creative burst and encouraging that creative burst in everyone is still very important. It's the adamant, please keep responding to what's around you, creatively, thoughtfully, poetically. Okay, what do you think of this? And then bring in political type stuff. Rather than just jumping to something like the global stage, it's like, is this happening here? How's it happening here? Like you look at how New Bedford Light was looking at how some of the recent policies was affecting what's going on in this area, from the jobs that are here, like the fishing area, to people not feeling comfortable to go outside of their home because they're scared of what's going to happen. And then you look at things like certain types of entities being built as these policies are rolling out, and it's like, how do we look at that in our own backyard and then respond to that from that scope, but still think passionately creative design materials, still come from your own soul, but look at how your own soul's looking at that. So it's not trying to force this, but at the same time ask the question. So going back to the Gallery X exhibit, I think they did such a great job asking that question, right? And so I highlighted it, and when I highlighted it in the scope of, this is speaking on things that are beyond our community. Like the entities I was talking about, like in Virginia, North Carolina that I'm talking to, they're talking about the same things. And it's it's not just, And so that in that scope, it's like, is it happening here in our own backyard? It's different in every backyard, but there's something of a similarity that's going on within that.
And there are other people and organizations who are helping you in this cause. You don't feel alone.
Oh, I don't. That's why, again, I call it the Sirens NB. They're helping by being active in what they're focusing on. And so I try to go in and look at what they're focusing on, what they're producing, and then give that more of an audience and bring more eyes to that. So it's like this matchmaker. I've always loved matchmaking. I've always loved saying, you should meet this one, or you should know this one because, and then just walking away.
Okay. And so, Kat, that's been Wake Up New Bedford. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marcus. This has been fabulous.
Yeah, this has been a real pleasure. I really would like to do a follow-up and have a part 3. I feel like there's so much more we can talk about.
There's so many things. Thank you for doing this. This is fantastic. Highlighting voices, highlighting things going on in the area.
And we're just promoting each other.
Thank you.
Promoting positivity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, thank you everyone for watching. This has been Wake Up New Bedford with Kat Knutsen. And you can check out her page on the Sirens MB and on other social media. And stay positive, and thank you for watching.